Well, thank you, Tom, for the inspirational opening. My name is Neil Brackin, the president of Advanced Radar Company and Radiometrics, and I'll be facilitating the first panel this morning. So if the panel participants would like to come forward while I just say a quick hello. You know who you are. There you go. Don't be shy, front and center. While they're getting seated, I just wanted to let everybody know kind of the overview of this first session. And that will be on our key topic for the 3 days of emergency warning systems. And I credit the Brackin group with these seminars, we'll say, or these gatherings, because of the strength of the interaction that occurs during them. So for each of the panelists, I'll provide an introduction of who you are and where you're from, but then I'd also like you to give just a statement and whether that is, hey, what's your current biggest challenge? Maybe where you are in the emergency warning system life cycle. If you'd like to share a success story, maybe from your experiences right now with the group here. And then for everybody that's it's the audience, but you're really an extended panel. And again, these the sessions and Brackin conferences are about interaction. So I also want you to think about what's the topic that you would like to bring forward, like to have the panel make comments on, and everybody be thinking about what is the goal that you want for today that serves you best, whether you're a representative of hydromet agency, you're a private company, you're a vendor. What do you want to get out of this session and the next 3 days? Because you can make it happen. It's all about participation. So participate with the panel and have a good engagement. And I'll start with that. If you'd like to take your turns and introduce who you are, where you're from, and give us an opening statement.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the organization for the invitation and for this meeting. My name is Carlos Angelis. I'm from Brazil. I work for the National Center for Monitoring and Alerts of Natural Disasters. That's a federal organization created in 2011 to implement. I was responsible at that time to implement in federal perspective. So we were responsible to deploy some sensors, create a system that could evaluate and use the data, integrate the data, and issues alerts in hazard areas perspective. So it was a big challenge because Brazil is a huge country. And we have 27 states, 200 million people living there, and more than 80,000 risk areas mapped in half of the municipalities of the country. Challenge because we have to work with the federal institutions, local institutions, regional institutions, and the main challenge is we have to have precision in our alerts. Otherwise, there is no reliability and people doesn't trust. And that's for the others, and then we can continue the discussion.
Yves will be a senior program manager at the Caribbean Development Bank. The Caribbean Development Bank, as you know, we serve the Caribbean. We have 19 Boeing members countries that we serve. Obviously, as a development bank, we working with national and then can give you some example. One entity that we work like the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology. We're working with our colleague CDEMA as well, CMO. I see that Arlene is looking at me. So obviously we provide technical assistance and financing to the countries to support early warning system. And when I say early warning system, we're really looking at the 4 pillars of early warning system. We're not only looking at the hydromet monitoring, but we're also looking at risk knowledge at the community level. So our support for the Caribbean, it's really a priority for CDB because so is the context of multi-hazard, both hydro hazard that we experience in the region. So obviously, is a priority. In terms of challenges, I think we have challenges in the region, but let me look at them at 2 levels. Looking at the strategic level, obviously, although we have a strategic roadmap when it's come to multi-hazard early warning system, but I think the adoption is limited because we see many countries have multi-hazard early warning policies so far, and this is very important to have this framework in place for coalition and prevention and the effectiveness of so that's another level is the which we have a lot of chat
covered by Meteo France. And because the location, the best location on the island for the radar site would be where a telephone company had the antennas. We had to bring them on board also. Um, and we had to coordinate all that because everyone saw the importance of the project. What the telephone company was able to do is they were able to use the tower because they had radio stations that were interested in using this site also. So the tower for the radar, the radio stations could put their antennas there. The telephone company would have the list for the land, and we would partner with them to have in their building all our equipment and so on. And they would carry the traffic in terms of the fiber to our office. So we had funding from the French side on the Interreg, the government of St. Maarten, contributions from the telephone companies, the radio stations, and so on, because everyone came on board to see the importance of it. And then the Meteorological Department of St. Maarten would be responsible for the day-to-day operations of the radar, which is incorporated in the Caribbean composite of radars.
Right. So thanks to my colleagues for raising those critical issues. I'm sorry, I'm a little cold, so I'm trying to adjust the climate in the room at the moment. But my colleague from the private sector raised some concerns, of course, that are, they're concerns that we've been talking about in the region as well. And as we are fast approaching, hurricane season is upon us. You talked about, I wasn't around at that time when you talked about years ago, the size of the cone and, and that having improved significantly. If you look at the Caribbean region, the CDEMA participating states, it's really, for the most part, a narrow stretch. And when you looked at the path of many of the hurricanes, and in particular Hurricane Beryl last year, a white cone can make a big difference or a narrow cone. But I'm starting there to talk about I mentioned that we are particularly focused on the matters around response capacity in the multi-hazard or the warning systems framework. And you asked where we start. Of course, we start with the imminent threat and the alerts, warnings as issued by the competent authorities, CIMH and the National Met Services. But then where do we go from there? My colleagues mentioned too about data and the issue of information and so on in the Caribbean. We do have some challenges with I guess we'll talk about throughout the conversation about in data sharing. But where we start is with our pre-impact data. So we need to know what the forecast means for the country, where the impacts are likely to be worse, impact-based forecasting, if you will. And so immediately the CDEMA system or 20 participating states or partners, once we've received a warning of an imminent threat, we will mobilize our partners to start the conversations about what needs to happen in preparation, as well as the likely impact, so response. And the critical thing there is that pre-impact information, those pre-impact assessment data that will tell us, what are the conditions on the ground. If it's a tropical cyclone, often the islands are so small that, one cyclone passes across the entire island. But in some cases, which areas are more like, we have the topography of the region, some of the countries are quite mountainous and densely populated in some parts because they're small islands. So the information sharing, which is a persistent challenge that we're trying to manage, especially in this at this time when, we're using models that are outpacing, much of everything else, AI and so on. So the data and information sharing architecture in the region is one that we are trying to arrest and trying to tackle. But we start with, after that, those warnings, we start with looking at what this means in terms of possible impact, and then how do we prepare.
Just to implement an early warning system, it's not easy. It's a complicated thing because it involves many aspects and issues and topics, etc. In our case, the most dangerous hazard disaster in Brazil is flash floods, and landslides. It's different than Caribbean and here in the US, or hurricanes and tornadoes and etc. So our main focus is, I think it's for everybody, is save life and minimize impacts in the infrastructure and the economy. So to design a system that can provide information to reach these targets, we have to identify risky areas, and we had to do that the same. I think it's the same in everywhere. Risky areas where people are living in hazard areas. We had to deploy sensors, we had to integrate data, develop softwares, and etc. So that's the main challenge, because the most important thing at the end of the day is the coordination to do those things. Hardware, software, it's easy to buy, to deploy, but coordinate with other institutions and make a build a database and integrate everything is the main challenge. So I think that's the topic that we can discuss and go ahead.
Very good. Yes. Thank you. Good comments across the board there, and kind of around the theme of you're not alone. We're all working on this together, and reach out. So if you have diversity in country or in the region, if there's a trade organization, there's a regional hydromet group, get engaged, ask for help, engage with a partner, benchmark with others. That'll help you get things moving. Any comments from anybody in the audience here that'd like to comment on that, and we'll move on to the next topic.
Hello, good day. Marshall Alexander from Dominica. In light of the revelation that was made as it relates to model uncertainty, what do you consider to be some of the repercussions in terms of communication, insurance, and so on, or communicating the messages to the public? And what is the domino effect? And what can you do to solve? What would you be able to do to solve that problem?
Thank you. Who wants to take that? Models.
First, the first start. So you're talking about modal uncertainty, and I know if you're doing probabilistic model, really, it's probabilistic. You cannot be 100%. But I have heard in the Caribbean, for example, some where say the God is from their country, so nothing gonna happen. So they will not take action. But we have seen the devastating impact of many of these events all the time. We try to improve in terms of the model, because the more data that we can have, the more accurate the model can be, and the projection, the forecast. So, but in the context of a vulnerable country, a vulnerable region, we really need to educate the population. They need to be aware. It's not a funny thing. It's something that can happen, that can cost their life. It can happen because it's probabilistic. You make a forecast, as John was explaining. it's turning my turn. It can happen. But I think when there is an immediate threat, obviously, we need to advise, communicate the population, and take action. And that's come with public awareness and education, particularly in the context of the Caribbean, with this sense that it's not going to happen, and sometimes when it is happening, it's too late. I think as key partners, stakeholder, we need to really focus on educate the population on the risks. They are real. It's happening. And if you look at gratefully because of more data that we have now and trying to downscale model, we can have more forecasts, more model with accuracy for the Caribbean. And keep in mind as well, because of the size of these islands, sometimes it's really difficult to have model that can predict for this specific area that's gonna happen. But we have seen we are setting impact, and it's our responsibility to make sure we ensure that the population take action at the time, and it need to be quick. Let me stop it.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to say it's a important part of the strategic plan and the initiative for any country is to, look upstream and look to your neighbors, as part of the emergency warning plan needs to be, how am I going to get good data upstream and to and from my neighbors? So you can't just have a wonderful network here in Florida and, you're not getting any data from east of here. That's going to impact your models and everything you're doing. So part of a good emergency warning plan, a good strategic plan, is looking to your neighbors and sharing data both ways. Yep.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Part of the emergency warning plan would be, critical part would be communication. And I always maintain that you have to be honest and upfront with the persons you're communicating with. If you have limitations in your models, you have to let persons know that. If the probabilities in any one element, apart from the other, would be lower, you have to let persons know that. And as John was said, if we're going to be less, if the studies show that we're going to be less reliant on whichever model it is, we have to let persons know that, so that the level of preparation can differ. And that will also adjust the disaster risk management of the country. So it's about communication, how you send out a message, and being very open in terms of your probabilities to the public.
So the problem as well is that mobilization and preparedness is costly, right? So, in the case of Dorian, my example, the state of Florida was able to save millions of dollars because no mobilization was required, because there was full confidence from the specialists at the National Hurricane Center that what the models were indicating, that Dorian would slow down and make that sharp northward turn, was going to happen, and therefore Florida saved all this money. Now I realize, these island nations are quite small. It's difficult to separate one part of the country from another because everybody's confined within a limited square mile area. But I think it does make a difference when you're talking about whether one island needs to prepare and the other one does not. And now suddenly many more people have to spend money on it. Sometimes mobilization can be dangerous. Just the mere fact of having to move elderly people or whatnot. I mean, that is a burden. And I just fear that we're heading into an era in which suddenly, we're back to where we were 30 years ago, where many more people need to mobilize for something that won't happen That'll only happen to some folks, but not others, which, by the way, in the long run, leads to the whole, cry wolf syndrome, where people start to get upset because, a storm was announced and the storm did not come, right? So, I mean, these are some of the repercussions of what's being done right now.
That's a good segue. And talking about a strategic plan, sharing data, talking to your neighbors, it's funding. Every good initiative, every plan needs a funding source. So what are some good success stories that you have all had in regards to finding a funding partner? Is there a public-private partnership that worked? Is there an organization or group? What was the pathway that any of you found where you found success in funding the emergency warning system implementation and planning?
I think we have a good example working together with private sector. We established a collaboration with a company that produce weather radar. Weather radar for us is a very important tool to identify the rainfall and do nowcasting, etc. So what we did with this company is we established an agreement. The company installed the radar. We use the radar for free, but the company can use the radar for other purposes, to sell data, to sell service. And it was very good for that company because it was a case that, and company used our case to offer the product for the other companies. And so far they sold other 5 radars. And we are very happy to use the radar because it's useful for us in our case to do our alerts. So I think that's an example in partnership with private sector.
I won't speak directly to private sector partnership. I think my colleagues might do a better job at that. But I want to make a comment relating to the resource mobilization. We know that early warning systems, especially for monitoring, forecasting, dissemination, and so on, it's quite expensive, especially in the context of small island, low-lying coastal states that are members of the CDEMA system. What I think, and two, as my colleague would have pointed out, it's not just the challenges relating to the models we rely on in the Caribbean, but also direct access to funding and technical support is also affected by the current climate. Right. So what I think is important for us to try to understand the needed avenues and arrangement for sustaining the funding, reducing the silos, and sort of connecting the dots in terms of all of the partners we're working with. For CDEMA, we have some governance arrangement that pull together our partners and the resources that they bring to the table, ensure that they're working in tandem with one pathway, one strategy, one strategic framework, so that there is continuity and so that we're able to maximize the use of the resources, because funding sources go and come. Partners, focus shifts to different regions. And of course, based on other national and global priorities, we see changes in much needed funding support. So within the CDEMA system, we have established a regional early warning systems consortium with key partners, and including now we've introduced membership from the Caribbean private sector organizations. So, because of course, one of the priorities for the consortium is to look at the funding resources. But what I'm putting on the table here is beyond the discussions about who are our funding partners. And I'm not trying to shy away from that because, of course, I'm sitting next to the bank. The bank has been, the bank has been a good partner throughout. But beyond the conversations about particular successes with partners, what's very important, it's ensuring that we're working within a framework that allows for the continuity, allows for sustainability, break down silos and overlapping in the resources, which is still, you know, is an issue that we continue to try to reduce, and to ensure that at the end of the day, there is a pathway towards regional and national ownership, a pathway towards the countries being able to say, at this point, we'll be able to include some of this, more of this, these aspects into our national budgets. So we want to be very clear and strategic about that.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. You can't discuss funding without sustainability, right? That's such a key part of that. You know, keep looking to the audience if you have a question or comment on there. Go ahead.
Hello, good morning. Thank you to the panelists for your inputs. I'm Álvaro Escardili from Argentina. And my question is, which is your opinion or comments on the UN program, Early Warnings for All? And what do you think about if it is realistic or applicable in your own countries or regions? Is it working already? Do you feel it's going to work well with your own specific characteristics or regionals? Thanks.
I think it's my own opinion. I think this initiative has pros and cons. I think the most important thing of this initiative is the integration of all of the countries that are involved. It's important. Then we can have access to other data rather than ourselves, because the weather, there is no border. The cold front that come from Argentina and reach Brazil, there is no border. So we need data from Argentina, Brazil. So I think this initiative is very good. But at the end of the day, for the end user, I think there is some more things to do, because an alert has to be precise and accurate. Otherwise, there is no reliability and people will not move from the danger. So in this case, this initiative doesn't reach the goal, because we need precision in local, in the local where the disaster will happen. But in overall, I think this initiative is a good thing.
Yeah. Just want to add on that. Evan, you want to come with the questions? Okay. Yeah, just want to weigh on the UN initiative. Basically saying all people should be covered by early warning by 2017, 27, yeah, sorry. So I think it's very important, particularly if you look at in the context of the Caribbean, as I mentioned, that's really key. You really want everyone to be covered. But I think it's very ambitious to say by 2027. We're in 2025. So if you look at all the gaps, all the challenges that we mentioned, I don't see how realistic it can be to have everyone, for example, in the Caribbean covered by effective early warnings by 2027. But it's important because since we have this initiative was launched, we certainly see more coordination and between partners, and also mobilization of resources, as you mentioned, which really important to get to that target. We need a lot of resources. When I say resources, not only financing, but technical resources, as I mentioned. And that's bring me to the point where we were discussing. We say we're a bank, we're a development bank. I want to make this thing, but we really work in partnership to mobilize resources. And I just want to give some example of the bank work, because we make it a priority for early warning system and overall climate resilience in the region. It's in our work program, and we have been able to mobilize a lot of resources for. One key example is working with the European Union. I was in a position to lead a project, a program for the bank over the 5-6 years, where we had really great resources. I'm talking here about 13 million euro that we were able to mobilize and invest in the Caribbean in all aspects of climate resilience, including early warning system. It was so successful that we were able to mobilize another 14 million. And currently we have the Caribbean Action for Resilience Enhancement Program, which I'm leading for the bank, that provide also grant resources. That's just to emphasize the importance of partnership and make it a priority, and so we can move forward. But I think we need to tap to some of the facilities that provide resources that can be used for early warning system or climate. GCF, the Green Climate Fund, is one of them. And I don't think in the region like the Caribbean, we receive enough resources from these facilities. And there are many reasons for that. We speak about data, which is an issue. We speak about the size of our country. That's another issue. We need to look at a more programmatic approach, working together, have large regional project program that we can go and look for resources at these facilities. And that's how you can mobilize. If you just have a single project, yes, you implement it, but if you look the magnitude of the challenges and what you need to be addressing, particularly in the context of early warning for all that you mentioned by 2027. So you need really transformative impact. You need a lot of resources, and we need to work together. And that's why I think more programmatic approach is really, really important. You mentioned it, basically, to work with Argentina in the Caribbean. All these small islands, we really need to work together, because it doesn't even make sense in terms of economy of scale, just a little small island working on its own and trying to get the resources.
It's great. Yes, good. So collaboration is the key. And again, for everybody here, connect the dots with your colleagues and fellow attendees through the next 2 to 3 days, and take some specific initiatives away from this conference to get the funding ball rolling. I know on the private sector, that's a responsibility all of us have. We're visiting different countries. We're doing the sales calls and working with different groups, and you have success stories. So share those with your other constituents and customers out there. It's our responsibility to help them find the funding and the resources and the partnerships as well, to move all of this forward towards those lofty goals in 2027 and beyond. Evan, Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Evan Thompson. I'm the Director of the Meteorological Service in Jamaica. My question is primarily directed toward Yves Personna as well, because we've been talking a lot about data. And, data is critical for our region, but also we require the kinds of research that would be necessary that will also move that into applications where we talk about improving our models and making sure that they're adequate for what we require. So my question to CDB really is, first of all, recognizing, of course, that the World Meteorological Organization is pressing forward with the Global Basic Observing Network, wanting to establish that network, ensuring that sufficient data points are available to get into into our numerical weather prediction models, etc. But we're also pushing, or the WM also pushing the SOF, the financing mechanism that should help to enable the development of the G1, especially in least developed countries and small island developing states. So my question is whether the CDB, how much the CDB is involved in the implementation of the SOF and the financing possibly of the SOF. And also the question is also recognizing the importance of research for data. And recognizing also the whittling down of the research where the United States in particular is concerned, and therefore the requirement for the region to step up with its work and probably become the alternative sources of creating the kinds of analyses that are required. How much is CDB pushing that as a priority for funding in ensuring that we're able to meet that challenge or rise to the opportunity? Thank you.
Thank you, Evan, for these questions. It's a difficult question for me, but let me try to tackle it step by step. On this SOF, we certainly see complementarity between our work at CDB and the work of SOF. Actually, last week, they have their workshop. I think it was last week. They have their workshop in Jamaica, actually. And I spoke to the complementarity of our work at CDB because of our priority in terms of early warning system and climate resilience in general, and how we tackle early warning system and see how that resources from SOF and what we're doing at CDB can be complement each other. And we're really open for the opportunity for further collaboration with SOF, but also all other partners working in the Caribbean on this important thematic. I said all other partners because I mentioned previously, it's really work that's needed to be done collaboratively. It's not one we're open with SOF. In terms of some of the challenges we see in terms of financing for the region, I do think from these challenges, we can see some opportunities as well to rely on diverse source of financing, involve a lot of partners. And I can say, for example, in the case of the Caribbean Development Bank, we've been working with a lot of partners to mobilize resources, and not the US, because the US is not a member of the Caribbean Development Bank. So we've been working with the partners that are members to mobilize resources. And we are in the cycle of our Spatial Development Fund. That's the 11th cycle. And there are more resources pledged for climate resilience, which is a priority, and that's going to include resources for early warning system as well. But our ground is really working with regional institutions and national entities in the region. We have been working with CIMH, CDEMA, CMOs, and so on. We will continue to work with them and explore mobilize more resources. And I say, and as I mentioned previously, I think it's really important. It's time now to kind of try to tap, uh, get more resources from some of the existing facilities that they're there for a while. But if you look at what the region get from them, it's very small, and we are very vulnerable, like the GCF, the AF, the GF, those facilities we really need to try to get more resources. But as I mentioned previously, I don't think we get to that if we're working in silos. As my colleagues here mentioned, we need to come together. We need to adopt a programmatic approach. And I think forum like this one promoting this collaboration among partners are very important. And I think that's the way to move forward.
Thank you. Great comments and really setting up what we want to in this first session, which is ideally a bunch of individual conversations that happen over these next 2 days between the panel, audience members, and amongst yourselves too. One more comment from the audience, and then I'll cue you up. We'll have a closing remark, but I'd like to hear from each of you a comment on forward-looking. You brought up the topic of social media. You know, it's there, it's out there. Be afraid. No, well, how do we use that? How do you leverage that in your emergency warning system? And the important part of communicating to the population in a positive way. And if you can make a comment on that, or if you have something else on technology, AI, how you think that might impact emergency warning systems, that's sort of new and evolving in there. So we'll give you all the opportunity of that, but one more comment.
Hi, good morning. My name is Dwayne Scott. I am from the Belize Met Service. I manage our observation network. I have a kind of loaded question. My question is this: is there steps that a country can take to ensure that they have a functioning early warning system? I am very kind of meticulous in terms of setting up systems. So I'm just thinking, is there a way for a country to assess themselves to see whether or not they have a functioning early warning system? I asked this against the background of last year I went to Taiwan for a 3-week early warning training, and Taiwan gets hit by earthquakes and very heavy rainfall. They're susceptible to flooding and other stuff. And they have a very meticulous way of doing things. They stress preparedness, just a simple thing like cleaning your drains, ensuring that those things are done. They stress or they invest in their Met services and checking the products that their Met services deliver, and there's a stress on their response, their emergency response, whether it's from the fire service or stuff like that. So every step of the emergency cycle is kind of meticulously looked at and continuously improved upon. So my question again is, how can a country assess themselves and check whether or not their system, they have a system in place? Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good question, Belize. And I know Belize being one of the CDEMA participating states. From a broader strategic perspective, I'm saying that to say not especially focused on just warning, monitoring, forecasting, and dissemination. We have a system. I'll backtrack a little bit to talk a little bit about CDEMA. Many of you already know, but for some of you who may not, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency is a system of the 20 participating states, governed at 2 levels by the 20 participating states. And so it's the states that come together and determine what system they want. At 2 levels, they come together and decide on the system, whether this approach will work. They actually approve the arrangements, and then at the technical level, the disaster offices and key CARICOM institution partners say, well, this is the early warning system we would like to implement over this period, and approve that, and then it goes to the Council of Ministers of CDEMA at the ministerial level for that key political buy. So setting that up to say there is a system. And this is where to our development partners, UNDRR, and so on, early warning systems for all, and so on, are also lining up as a part of the system. So we first established. Well, there's an international tool developed by WMO, a checklist, early warning systems checklist. But in CDEMA, we worked with our participating states to refine that specifically for the Caribbean. So we have adopted that checklist for the Caribbean context, the small island development states, low-lying coastal states context, and we use that as a model for all of the participating states. So they first go through that checklist that assesses all elements of their systems across the 4 pillars: risk, information, down to risk preparedness response committee, right? And once that's done, then we're able to work with them to put together a report in terms of what the gaps are, the strengths as well as the gaps, but then in a very targeted way, develop a roadmap for the countries, for each country, on how we're gonna move the needle, right? So this is a process that we've gone through with quite a few countries, along with UNDRR is also implementing that same arrangement in partnership with CDEMA. And once that roadmap is developed, then we also we go beyond that to look at the the enabling environment that often stymies and presents some bottlenecks and some challenges. So we have a model that was agreed by the countries again, a model policy and adaptation guide for the countries to actually develop a multi-hazard early warning systems policy, so that at the strategic level, at the policy level, there is a clear guideline, a clear pathway for all of the agencies involved, to a clear avenue for them to work together in that regard. And we also have, for the region, model legislation. That legislation was updated with a specific section to cater for multi-hazard early warning systems. So we're not just looking at, okay, what the gaps are and what the technology that is needed, what are the technical elements, but we're also looking at what are the strategic, the enabling environment that is required to move the needle. I think Dr. Personna mentioned earlier that we still have quite a lot of participating states who have not adopted some of the policy, for example, as yet. I think just about 70% of the states are not yet there in terms of putting that policy in place. But that's where we really try to lean on the partnerships to mobilize the resources, because we're talking about states that, and we talked about ambitious goals earlier, right? We talked about 2027 and how ambitious we want to be. That's certainly good for momentum, but we have to address key issues of capacity at the national level. We have a lot of offices. Belize, you might be a little bigger in terms of our participating states. We have some offices, 2 people, working. In the case of one, for example, Haiti, just 2 people working. One is almost up for retirement. And so we have real capacity issues to address. So when we talk about those goals, we have to also look at the avenues for which they need to be sustained. So we're working with and we can have a conversation. I think Belize just started to actually add some more context, that Belize just started this process through the disaster office. I know that just last week they had an initial workshop to go through that process of developing the roadmap, assessing the gaps and developing the roadmap. And within that, so it's not just for the hydromet service. Within that, you have all of the agencies that are part of the value chain for multi-hazard early warning systems participating. So we do that checklist, we establish what the gaps are, work on a roadmap that's specific to the country, and then we work with them to really try to tie up the policy and legislative elements. And we have developed the model tools to allow the countries to do that.
Terrific. Thank you. Sir.
Yeah, just want to add to that quickly. I think Belize would already have part of the answer. And that would be in the work you would be doing on WIS 2.0 with you and Trinidad helping other Caribbean countries. And it just shows clearly that we do not have the capacity within each island, and the importance of entities like CDEMA, CIMH, CMO to move us forward. Some countries are bigger, they would have capacity, they would move quicker, even when we talk about the whole early warning system and where we get to and so on. So the important thing would be, how do we continue to strengthen these organizations to produce what we need and being able to share? We know the challenges that will come in terms of funding for them. So how do we get the political buy-in based on government's policies to show them how important these institutions are to us as small island developing states, that we can do what we need for the public.
Very good. Excellent. I think you pointed out some resources there. Of one more comment here.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Arlene Lang, the coordinating director. I manage the headquarters unit in Trinidad and Tobago. And one of the things that was mentioned earlier was the enactment of policy and legislation. So I know this is a question for Yves, because we've been through this process. We created, with the support of the CRUISE program, that's the Climate Risk and Early Warning Systems, a model hydrometeorological bill and related meteorology policy for the region. But so few of the members have actually gone ahead through the enactment. We went through with 9 members to tailor the draft, the model bill to their national circumstances. But in a number of cases, they've just been halted, or they haven't been advanced by the ministry, or the ministries have changed actions and so on. But I was wondering how much pressure could be brought to bear by our national finance partners to put some pressure on the government so that they are aware of the importance of getting this enactment. Because in some cases, the ability to, with the people in this room, are just stymied because there is no mechanism by which the meteorological service or the disaster offices can effectively partner with the entities in the private sector, or even sometimes academia. There have been some cases where, for example, a telecommunications company or somebody would want to work with the Met Service, and they start the process, and then someone in the ministry goes, "Oh no, you can't do that." And so I'm just trying to figure out, how do we help that foundational process to succeed?
Yeah. Thank you, Alan. Really good question. So you would the word pressure. I would use a different word. I would say how we engage them, how we educate them or make them aware of the importance of such a legislation. Uh, because at the end of the day, even if they adopt it, is the whole issue of implementation. If you don't really see the importance of it, and you just think it's some financing that you're gonna get, and you kind of doing it, it's not sustainable. So I think really the whole issue of education is it's not at the community level, but we need to do it as well for our decision makers. They really need to understand that it is important. It is should be a priority for the country, and with that, they should be the political will. I I don't think a change in government should really stop issues that are important and that need to be addressed by a country. But unfortunately, we have seen so many of these cases in many countries, a shift in the government and is no longer a priority, while the challenge are there and it should be a priority. That's why I want to emphasize on the education and awareness aspect of it at all levels. Uh, at CDB, you addressed the question to me, but I think it's a question for everyone here to, to look at. And because really, I have seen in many countries, because they potentially a donor, a development agency that want to finance, and okay, let's make it a priority for now. But really, the issue we're talking, it's really real and need to be a priority all time. So that's why I think really need to emphasize on public awareness and education, and also for our that's my take on it.
Great. Thank you. Great response. We're at the first session here, and I want to thank everybody for a great opening session. A lot of good questions and comments for all of us to move forward on over these next couple of days. And you can see it's as these Vrisian gatherings are about next steps in action. So you got introduced to the panel up here and some of the audience members. Please engage on those one-on-one patients to follow so that you can take the opportunity to really move it forward for yourself and for your emergency warning system, whatever state you're in currently. There's resources in this room that can help you with your initiatives. So I know we're going to move to a break and a chance to engage, interact with the vendor group that's here. Have a coffee or a refreshment, stand up, stretch legs, but keep these conversations going throughout the rest of today and the next couple of days. Panel, thank you very much. A lot of great content and great responses from all of you up here. And again, great introduction for everybody. Enjoy some coffee and the conversation's going.